Hi, welcome to another episode of the Prescott Cars and Coffee podcast. Today I'm here with Lucas.
Hello.
Lucas, I think you're most known for, I'm going to mispronounce it, and you're going to have to fix me, but it's like Pins.
Yeah, so it's the Pinzgaure.
Okay, Pinzgaure.
Yes.
I'm going to try to remember that. And tell me about that, because that is a very interesting vehicle
Okay,
to see.
so the Pinzgaure is a 1974 Swiss Army radio truck now. It started off as a troop carrier with 4 benches in the back. You can see 8 people. I've converted it to a radio truck, but used by mainly Switzerland and Austria from the 1970s through about 1990.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh, interesting. So it was mainly a military truck that they used. Now, being a military vehicle, like how did that get from Switzerland and Austria into the States?
So when Switzerland started retiring these trucks, there were a couple people in the U.S. who had connections in Europe. You know, the Swiss Army auctioned them off to the public. So the one of them actually lives here in Prescott. His name is Thilo. He used to run a dealership. He's German, moved here, and he saw a market for it when the Swiss started auctioning them. And he had friends and connections and knew how to import stuff because he had moved here and brought his personal cars over. So he started buying Pinzgauers in Switzerland and then bringing them over here. He had a small dealership. He was selling them off like used cars here, and because they had all sorts of normal vehicle features, they were, you know, relatively practical to sell here. They took off.
And does he still sell them today, or?
So he doesn't sell them today because the surplus is dried up. They've sold off all of them. He still does work on them, and he still does sell them on consignment for people. They can bring their trucks to him to sell them, but the stock of the trucks is gone now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how is getting parts and like wrenching on that thing?
So, first of all, wrenching on it's really easy. Between the front seats, the whole engine cover comes out and the whole engine's exposed. It's pretty easy to work on. Parts availability and pricing is interesting. The stuff that breaks often and needs replaced often is still cheap and available. The expensive stuff to fix that hopefully you don't ever want to fix never breaks. So
Cool.
Really a lot of the stuff is easy. Like one of the stoplight switch for the brake pedal, that's really easy. It's cross-compatible with a Volkswagen Rabbit stoplight switch from 1987, so you can get that in Napa.
Isn't that brilliant to see?
Yeah.
So many parts interchange. I'm going to interrupt his story. For an example, though, like I have my older M3, and there's sway bar links, and go figure, a Chevy Malibu has the same links, and they're built a little bit better, I would say. They don't bend as easily, and so a lot of guys order those Chevy Malibu links and put them on the M3 and go track them and everything, and that's just like an interchangeable part. So it's cool to hear about another car that's like probably don't produce the part anymore, but you can still find it.
Yeah.
I mean, Volkswagen's huge, so that'd be easy to get.
Yeah, no, it's pretty easy. I mean, I'm a college student. I don't even work full time. With the money I do make, I've been able to keep that truck going as a daily driver.
Yeah.
So it's really not that bad.
Well, how did you get into that kind of vehicle? I mean, that's not.
Yeah.
I had never heard of that vehicle until I really met you. I mean, I know Mercedes, and I'm sure you're gonna roll your eyes, but how many times does it get mistaken for the Mercedes? What do you call
The
it?
Unimog.
Unimog, yeah.
Well, so I got into these trucks when I was probably just learning how to talk.
Wow.
I grew up in California, so every winter my family would go skiing up in Big Bear. And Big Bear was kind of near another importer of these trucks, so every year you'd go up there and you would see like 4 or 5 of these trucks, and to this day I still know like where they're all parked, which colored Pinzgaure was parked at whose house, what shop. So I'd always see them driving from our hotel up to the slope. You drive by and you see, oh, there's that Pinzgaure, and I just love them because they look so different.
Yeah.
And I started obsessing over them, and I'd go home and I'd Google it and I'd read Wikipedia and I'd just look at everything I could find online. And then one year someone started doing off-road tours with theirs, so we took a tour on one, and that sealed the deal. I'm like, I need to have one of these trucks. So I spent my entire childhood obsessing over those trucks.
Just so cool.
Yeah, and so when I turned 17 and we moved to Arizona, through those years of research, I knew that Thilo, the former importer, was here. So I showed up at his shop, I told him I wanted to apprentice with him, and just that's how I got into really being around the trucks and subsequently buying one.
Right.
And then the Unimog thing, yeah, it gets mistaken everywhere I go. In my Instagram bio, I say no, not like a Unimog, because every gas station, everywhere I go, people are, oh, is that a Unimog or cool Unimog? It's not a Unimog, it's a Pinzgaure. They're completely different vehicles. And then people don't want to hear it because I've spent so much time researching. I'm like, I could tell you every difference, but no one cares.
Right.
Like, they're completely different trucks.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think, Unimog is certainly a unique vehicle, but the
Yeah.
Pinz is very, very unique.
Well, the main difference in terms of livability, Unimogs are so difficult to work on in comparison. Yeah. They're much bigger. Depending on how they were optioned, they could be much more difficult to drive. You cannot daily drive a Unimog like you can daily drive a Pinzgaure. So that's the main difference.
We had a client back when I ran a Euro shop in Long Beach.
Mm-hmm.
He had a Unimog, and it was a never-ending journey of just the diagnosis of what was going on with it. They're definitely a little bit finicky to diagnose. So it's awesome that the Pinz is relatively straightforward and reliable.
Yeah, you've got to have a passion to really, Pinzgaures and Unimogs both. You really need to want to work on those trucks to do a good job. If you don't have a passion for them, you'll never get it to run right. But Unimogs are just notoriously
I can name a lot of cars that you probably should have a passion for.
Yeah.
Because they're just, break you over. Well, going into why you're here, and you kind of alluded to it, school. So you're going to school for a pilot.
Yes.
Become a pilot.
Yeah. So I've been flying since I was 10 years old.
Wow.
But I'm in college now to make it, official, get a degree, makes you more hireable, whatever. But yeah, no, I've been flying since I was 10. I have about 200 hours now, which it's not crazy for someone my age. But yeah, flying is a big part of my life.
Nice. And does that start from like an early age? Like what kind of...
Yeah, so that's just like the Pinzgaure. That was another thing that started really early. I think I was 6 or 7 years old, and it was Christmas, and my grandma got me an expansion for a flight simulator. Well, I didn't have that flight simulator, so I was like, I don't know what this is. So I had to get the flight sim to play with what my grandma got me. So I bought a flight simulator for my computer, or my parents got me a flight simulator. I started playing it, and not realizing it, but I was learning how to fly. Every system, everything was pretty well modeled, and I was just playing this flight sim, and it was my favorite thing. I didn't play any other video games. I'd get home from school, I'd play flight sim until I went to bed. Sometimes I'd wake up before school, play flight sim, go to school, get home from school, play flight sim. And I told my parents, I want to do this in real life. Can I take flying lessons? And so we went to a local airport in California, a little mom and pop ran flight school. And I think I was about 8 by the time that happened. And they said, yeah, we'd be happy to do this, but when he's about 10 years old, so he can see over the dashboard a little bit better, because I was way too small.
That's kind of important when you're...
and that's what was funny to me, was it wasn't that, he's a kid, he might not be mature enough, it's he's too small. He can't see out. So we went back on my 10th birthday, took an introductory flight, and that's when it started. And then once a month from there on, my parents would pay for one flight lesson until I turned 16, started working myself, and just kept flying. And from there, it's just grown. And still going.
Nice.
Yeah, hopefully going to be a corporate pilot eventually. That's the end.
Okay. And where has been the most beautiful place that you've flown over?
The most beautiful place I've flown over would definitely have to be kind of the stretch between Sedona and the Grand Canyon.
Okay.
The Red Rocks, everything here is gorgeous.
That's what I hear. Sedona, every pilot I talk to locally, it's like that flight over Sedona is just amazing.
It is the most gorgeous place I've flown, definitely.
And do you fly often now, or is it mostly just schooling at this point?
It's kind of when budget allows. Work fluctuates, the cost of flying fluctuates, it's getting more expensive now. So, once every 2 weeks is kind of what I've been trying to go for. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. It depends, but I try to get up as much as I can.
Nice. Well, this looks like your land plane here. Tell me a little bit about this Fiat. It's an awesome little car. It definitely seems not your average 500.
Yeah, so this Fiat 500 it was almost an impulse decision. I had a Ford Ranger, and it's a Ford, it kept breaking. I know a Fiat's not really the vehicle you think of when you think of reliability, but I got sick of my Ford. Breaking and shockingly expensive to fix for an American truck. So it's I'm sick of this. It's almost killed me 3 times now. I'm done. And I was sitting at home, and my mom was yelling at me because she's like, so you got rid of your Ford Ranger, your reasonable vehicle. You only have the Pinzgaure now. How are you going to get to Phoenix? How are you going to travel? How are you going to do anything with that truck? What if that truck breaks? And she has a point. So I'm sitting online, looking at Craigslist and looking at car listings, thinking, what can I buy that's still fun? I want a car that's reliable and normal, for a lack of better terms, but it needs to be fun and not blend in. I don't just want a Silverado or just a Impala, whatever.
Right.
And then I was looking through my Snapchat memories, and last year I rented a car in California on a trip back to see some friends, and it was this girly little Fiat 500, baby blue, just stupid car. But I was like, man, that was such a fun car, and then I remembered that they had the Abarth version. I'm like, oh, let's look into that. So I watched some Doug DeMuro videos and Abarth reviews. I'm like, you know what?
This is a 2015 Abarth 500.
And I was like, you know what? That looks like a really fun car, and they're still cheap. Even in this bubble that the used car market's in right now, you can still get a Fiat 500 Abarth for less than $15,000. I'm like, that's affordable even on my budget. So I started looking, and I saw this one down in Phoenix, and it jumped out at me. All white with a hard top. I was like, that's the car I want. Went and test drove it and just fell in love instantly. So now I own a 2014 Fiat 500 Abarth.
And we have to talk about your license plate, because I think Pagani is the best auto manufacturer. It's like borderline. I think the Pagani, we can agree, there were supercars and there were hypercars.
Right.
The Pagani kind of pushed us towards the hypercar
Definitely.
Era that now, Ferrari has their hyper. Everyone has these hypercars.
Yeah.
But it really was the Zonda that kind of elevated everyone else into, up until then, Lamborghini and Ferrari, they're really their own competition.
Right.
And then, Pagani came around, and it was like, whoa. Now we got to compete with this stuff.
Yep.
We got to elevate all of our cars up to meet what the Zonda is doing.
Yeah. So the Pagani plate, obviously I just bought an Italian car, and I'm like, well, it needs a license plate. I need to, make it its own. It's already an Abarth, it's already unique, but I need it to be unique so everyone knows it's my Abarth. Yeah. So I hop on the DMV website, and it's like, I wonder what plates are available. I type in Pagani as my first thing, so I'm like, I love Pagani. It's from a child, that's been my, my poster car has been the Pagani Zonda.
Yeah.
So I just typed in Pagani, and shockingly nobody had taken it. So I'm like, yeah, buy now. Got the Pagani plate, put a little Zonda sticker on it in the same font as the Zonda badges. So it's now my little pocket Pagani.
I like, and that's your Instagram.
That's the Instagram pocket Pagani.
Well, talking about Pagani, you were saying you go to Pebble Beach, Monterey Car Week,
yeah,
and you photographed, and hopefully we can show some photographs on the Insta or the video here.
Yeah.
But what got you into photography? Because your photos are definitely not. It seems like they're not just with an iPhone. It seems
so. That's an interesting one, because I don't really even know where it started. I was about 12 or 13 years old, and I saw something about a car show in Westlake Village. It was Supercar Saturday.
Yeah.
And their poster car, I think for the one that I saw, was just like a mid-2000s Lamborghini Gallardo. But I saw that and I'm like, man, I don't see these cars very often where I grew up in Ventura. You have to drive into Los Angeles to see it. But I'm like, that seems kind of close. Can we go look at that? I asked my mom, and we went. And it was actually a really good turnout. There were, this was early 2010, so there weren't Aventadors and stuff, but Murciélagos, Gallardos, some nicer supercars for the time. I just fell in love, because I'm like, man, this stuff is way more accessible than people tend to think. People think, oh, Lamborghini, you never see that. You have to go to Beverly Hills, whatever. But it was right in our backyard. I'm like, that's really cool. So I just started going every month and looking for other car shows. And I started off taking pictures on my old Samsung Galaxy. It was some really awful old cell phone. And I just got into it because I realized it was more accessible. I'm like, that's cool. Right. And then it progressed into, well, I'm going to go to Hollywood and Beverly Hills for these car shows, and just started getting into it. And then when I was 15, I got my first camera for Christmas, and that's when it really took off, and I started learning how to not suck at taking pictures. And it grew into that, and that became a passion of mine, was seeing those cars.
And what camera are you using now?
So right now I'm using a Canon Rebel T6i. So it's old, it's still nothing fancy. I don't have the budget for a $5,000 camera. And it's only my second camera. I started with a Canon Rebel T5.
Okay.
It got stolen out of my truck. And then the insurance, our homeowner's insurance, overpaid me for it. So I'm like, cool, I'll do a little upgrade and got a T6i, a couple lenses, and that's it. I don't have some professional photographer set up. It's just a hobby. I don't have
Well, that's the beauty, though, is that once you understand the manual settings, with a decent lens, the body is, I don't want to say irrelevant, because there's definitely a difference with trying to shoot like a sporting event inside an arena and all that light capture.
Definitely.
But just a normal body camera you can buy from Best Buy or
Yeah.
something, but you know, with an aftermarket lens on it, that glass really makes a difference. And then of course, dialing in your settings manually and trying to capture something cool.
Well, and truth be told, most of my pictures, I don't even have any fancy lenses. I've got a couple. Most of my shots are with the Canon kit lens 18 to 55,
Yeah.
with a polarizer on it so they don't come out all glary.
Right.
But it's mostly a stock setup, and
Nice.
I work with what I've got. And there's way more talented photographers, obviously, but for fun, it gets the job done.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny. I mean, I got my passion for photography has always been through cars too. So over the years, I was out there shooting cars, and it's a nerdy little hobby to add to another, you know, sometimes nerdy little hobby. So
It is, but that's I think why I enjoyed photographing cars so much is I can't get people to pose. Like I can't pose people and model them and tell them, hey, do this, do that.
Right.
It's not easy. Cars, they just sit there and look pretty. It's so much easier to shoot a car, make a car look good than a person.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm into it.
Yeah. Well, a question I tend to ask people:
Sure.
if you had a budget of a C8 Corvette or less, so probably around I think like 65 or 75,000. I know they're going for more right now, but
Okay.
MSRP, what car would you get?
See, that's not a budget that I've considered very often. So that's an interesting question. Honestly, and this is kind of on an older G-Wagon, I think, like a mid 2000s G500.
Yeah.
I mean, those are in the $40,000-$50,000 range now because they're going up. I think that's what I'd get.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, old G-Wagon.
All right. Another pressing question: where, or really Arizona, is there any cool driving roads you like to go out and photograph your own vehicles on, or?
See, now that's an interesting one too because this Fiat's my first performance car, if you can call it that. So driving roads are a new thing to me because I'm used to going everywhere 30 miles an hour.
Off-roading,
Pinzgaure,
yeah.
But I mean, the drive to Jerome and actually through Jerome up into Sedona, Oak Creek, I think is one of my favorites. Out the back way of Prescott down towards like Yarnell is actually a really fun
The
drive.
white sparring line.
Yeah, I just realized that because I had to drive out there in an emergency the other day, and I took the Fiat, and I was like, well, I want to go fast, and I just didn't let off through the turns. Like, this is really cool. So that's probably my favorite road now.
Yeah, that road on like a warmer day where we don't have the black ice corners is a blast.
It is.
And then Oak Creek Canyon, I mean, what a beautiful drive. I always get stuck with pedestrian, or you know,
the problem is the traffic and the people.
But what a beautiful drive. So, well, Lucas, I really appreciate. Is there anything else that we haven't covered, or?
I don't think so. I think that covered just about everything.
Well, I hope to see you February, or this month, probably another 2 days before I release this video. February 26th will be the next Cars and Coffee event. Hopefully it'll warm up a little bit. Again, we're going to probably meet at 9:30 just to help the sun get out. And yeah, see you all then. Thank you for listening.